The other day I was doing some online shopping and my 8-year-old said, "Why don't you buy that?" My answer was, "It's too expensive. I'll try to find it cheaper." See, she didn't understand. So I thought back to when I was 8 years old and shopping with my mom. And I remember saying to my mom, "Hey mom, TVs are on sale. Why don't we go pick up a couple?" I didn't understand where money came from. I just assumed and took for granted that you go to the store, get what you want, and then leave. 30 years later, I find myself in the same situation, but a completely different role. You see, I have mortgage payments and water bill, electric bill, TV payments, car payments, and so much more. At the end of the month, the bills come due. You see, this reminds me of the parable we discussed last week in our small groups, the parable of the Unmerciful Servant. In this parable, a king decides to settle up with all the people and the servant who owes him money. This one servant that comes before him owes him millions of dollars. The servant pleads with the king and says he'll pay back the debt. We all know that's not going to happen. But the king has mercy on him and forgives that debt. He owes nothing. Later that same day, that same servant goes to another person who owes him a few $1,000s. The forgiven servant has that man arrested until he can pay back the debt. Well, the king gets word of this, and the forgiven servant comes before him again. The king then throws the forgiven servant in prison until he can repay the millions he's owed the king. And when is that going to happen? Never. You see, much like I have bills and debt that are owed to the electric and gas company, our sin is a debt that puts a chasm between us and God. Every time we sin, we get another bill. Every time we lie, another bill. Every time we fall short, yet another bill. They start to add up. But Jesus marked those bills as paid. He took care of our debt. That chasm that was between us and God was closed when Jesus died and rose again for us. The second part to this parable lies with how the servant treats his fellow servants. Instead of forgiving others like the king did for him, the unmerciful servant withholds forgiveness to those around him. You see, in our lives, when we don't forgive someone, we carry that baggage around with us. It weighs us down and affects all of our relationships. We need to forgive each other, just as God forgave us. Now, that may be a difficult thing to do. Maybe the person in your life who needs forgiveness the most has a lot of debt. But God calls us to forgive everyone, no matter how little or great the debt. For some of you, that forgiveness may be the most difficult thing you give to someone. But at the same time, it may be the greatest gift you could ever give. Because the greatest gift from God that we've ever received is a full forgiveness from Him. We'll see you next week.